All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to turn these into this. Well, it's not that quick, but it should be pretty easy. All right, V4 is done, it's out, it's available, and everyone should be able to make it now. This is going to be the instructional video that gives you the most current and up-to-date instructions on how to put the mold together, how to use it, and how to properly make sure that your masks are sanitized and clean. A few things are different between this one and the last one, so make sure that you're paying attention and you're recognizing those differences, because quite a few things changed since version 3 to make it a lot easier to make a mask, and also make it a lot faster to make a mask. So with that, let's get started with the post-processing. So first, you can see that around the edge here, there's these little parts that have basically in between that groove there. So what you're going to want to do for that is you're going to want to take a small screwdriver, just like this, and put underneath there and break it out. There we go, shut out. See how there's that new groove in there? So that is what's going to form the actual rotating portion of the mask. So go ahead and do that around the rest of it. There we go. And with that, you should see that there is now a groove all the way around the part. At this point, I recommend going back through and cleaning up any kind of burrs that were left in there with a razor. And this part actually came out really nicely, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of cleaning in there. All right, looks like I've cleaned up all those. So now we're going to try and clean up the rest of the parts. So the most important ones to clean are the two cavities. If they've got something like a bump inside, or if they've got hair, that's going to show up in your mask, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. So normally I just do a quick overlook of these, see if there's anything that's glaring or might cause major issues. This one looks okay. This one also looks okay. So what I'm going to do now, I see a few hairs in there, is I'm going to take this little butane torch that I've been using, set it to that, you can see that, and I'm just going to gently go over and try to remove all those hairs. This works good for most treatments. That should be good. So now we're going to go and clean the parts and get them ready to use in the next process. All right, now this is one of the most important steps of the process. We want to make sure that we apply enough soap to the molds. Otherwise, you're going to have this issue where when you go and pull the mask out of the mold, this nose piece will tear out. So you want to make sure that you have plenty of soap on the mold. Otherwise, you have this issue. So it's really important. You're going to need your soapy water. This is Dawn dish soap, but any dish soap should work. When you mix it, you want to have 10 parts water for every 1 part soap. Should be super simple. If you don't have a bucket like this, putting in a spray bottle and spraying that on your parts will work just as well. So in addition to that, I also have a cookie drying rack. Really, anything works for this. This is just to make sure that you can dry the parts without them dripping everywhere and properly dry. So now, I'll take the parts and make sure you submerge them. Make sure you give them plenty of time to work that soap in. Give it a little mix, just in case the soap has separated. This both removes any of the small 3D print particles or dust particles that are on the parts, as well as adds that thin soap layer that allows the silicone to release really easily. So that's good. I'm going to set this upside down like that to dry, and do the same thing with the other half of the mold. Don't forget to do the insert cavity. This is just as important. And there you go, all soaked up and ready to go. I am going to leave this for now and let it dry. It doesn't have to completely dry before you can use it, but at least a little bit. The water can have some issues with silicone, so it's best to wait until it's dryish to the touch. Don't wipe any of that off because that soap solution, that soap sticking on the part, is the really important part. Without that, it's not going to release properly. All right, it's been a little bit and it looks like the molds are dry. So these should be ready to go. I'm going to clean this up and then we can get them going. For this step, we're going to need the insert cavity, both of the external mold pieces, your 3 external clamps, and your dowel pins. I'm using stainless steel ones, but the 3 printed ones that I have in the files folder should work just as well, so no worries there. Start with the interior portion of the mold. Insert your dowel pins. There we go. Now take your exterior portion of the mold and clamp them together just like that. Now take your exterior clamps, these, and you're going to want to slide them over just like that. Go ahead and do that around the rest of the mold. And just like that, your mold is ready to go. So with that, let's take this, set it off to the side, as well as our insert cavity and insert cavity clamp. Set those aside and get them ready for the next step. So now we're going to be mixing the silicone. For this step, I like to use these cups that have a graduated scale on them. Makes it super simple to measure out the correct volumes of part A and part B. Really like these. You're also going to need 3 stir sticks. I use one of these small wood ones. They come with this cup. Then I also have 2 longer metal ones that allow me to kind of get into the containers. So these are nice, not required, but if you got them. You're also going to need your silicone. I am using Moldstar 20T. I've had good luck with this. The only downside of this is that it only has a 6-minute pot life. So that can be a little bit too short for some people, but I found that if you take this and put it in your fridge and let it sit for a few hours, you can extend that pot life from 6 minutes up to something like 20 or 30 minutes. It gives you a little bit more working time. So break these out. Now the silicone, you have part B and part A. When you mix these, they create a catalyzed reaction and cure to make your masks. Before I open those though, I'm going to put on gloves because these 2 components can be really messy and you don't want them on your hands. All right, I'm all gloved up and ready to go. So, it doesn't really matter which component you start with. If you're using a different silicone compound and one of the parts seems thicker than the other, put that one on last. That way it sinks to the bottom and helps it mix a little bit better than just you doing it by hand. Cool. So first I'm going to start with part A just because it's the closest. Take one of your mixing sticks and you're going to want to pre-mix the component. This just makes sure that anything that's settled out is now kind of mixed back into solution. So I've mixed part A, we set that off to the side. Now I'm going to mix part B. Now I'm going to pour part A. So for this, we're going to be pouring 70 milliliters of each one. They're equal by volume and by weight, so you have a scale that would also work. But I found a total of 140 milliliters tends to be best. So starting with part A, 70 milliliters. So I am going to be adding white pigment. So this is, I put it in a syringe just to make it super simple to put out and kind of in a controlled way. You can also just put it on your stir stick and mix it in. That works just as well. You really don't need that much pigment. So keep that in mind. So adding a little bit of pigment. There we go. Pigment is really nice because it helps you understand when it's fully mixed, because both components are the same color and it's kind of hard to tell when they're thoroughly mixed. So at this point, I'm just about ready. I need to add part B and then it's going to start catalyzing. So before I do that, I'm going to set up a timer. That way I know how much time we have going. So we set that up. I'm going to set it up as a stopwatch so I have an idea. And I'm going to hit go. There we go. So once this is mixed, we want to mix it for about 2 minutes, and then we should have around 15 minutes of pot life because I chilled it. Before we have to pour it and use it. Otherwise it'll start hardening and then it becomes unworkable. So we're pouring up to 140 milliliters now. There we go. Let's cap this so we don't end up knocking it over. Let's set these two to the side. All right. Now, I usually use a drill like this to stir, but to prove that you don't need any specialty tools, I'm going to do it by hand. That way I can show that anyone can do this. You don't need some kind of fancy jig or whatever. Just a cup and a mixing stick. When you do this, you're going to want to be careful not to mix in any more air bubbles. Those will show up later in the mask, and because of how complex the nose portion of the mask is, that can cause issues. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Looks like we're at about 3 minutes now. So I go ahead and set this off to the side, and I'm going to grab the mold. So this mold is designed in such a way that you can pour it into the top here, and that's how you can do it directly for that, no specialty tools. Or I've also got it designed where you can take some of these larger syringes, they're like $3 at Amazon, and you can inject it in that hole. And that makes it where you can more quickly get the silicone in these and make a bunch of them at once, while also making sure that the silicone's filling from the bottom up. That way you have less bubbles integrated into the mold, or into the mask. Okay, so now we're going to take it and we're going to pour it into the mask. You're going to start here on this side and let it kind of work its way around the mask. There we go. Starting on this side. Nice and slow there. You can see it just kind of slowly working its way in. We're at about 6 minutes now. So if I had not chilled it yet, there would be noticeable hardening of this silicone, and it would start to become much more difficult to work with. There we go. So I'm going to set this off to the side. Make sure you hold on to this, don't toss it. You'll use this as an indicator later to tell when your silicone is cured. So now that we've got that in the mold, you can see some of those bubbles in there that are starting to come out. And what I like to do is just kind of work it around like this so that you can work some of the bubbles out. The nice thing too with doing this is that you get a really good idea of what the current cure state of the silicone is. So it starts to move much more slowly. You know that it is starting to reach the end of its pot life, and it's time to go to the final step. You can also just skip this and put it in right away, but I want to demo this. That way, if you're making just one mask, you can make the one best mask you can. That looks good to me. I'm not seeing any more large bubbles coming out, so I think we are ready to press. So you can kind of see about how full that is, and some of those bubbles there on the surface, not super big. Sometimes you'll see a big bubble come from the bottom. That's fine. That means you're getting the bubbles out. But this one seems like I poured it just right. Now you're going to take your insert cavity, make sure the arrows align with the top, and you're going to place this in the middle there and gently press down. You should see some silicone come out from the sprue holes on the sides, and that is perfect. That's what you want. That means the mold is completely filling up. And you can see this is some of the excess we have coming out. Now take your final clamp, and that's going to sit there on the side, grab over the top, just like that. And now you're set. So I am going to leave this here for about 30 minutes, and then it should be cured. So I will come back and check on it, and I'll see you then. All right, it's the next day. I've left this out overnight to cure, so I know that it is fully cured. But if you are impatient, as I was the first time, to verify that it's cured, what you can do is first take the cup you mixed in, and you can use that as a base. If it feels solid there, then you can try touching the silicone, and if it's at all sticky, it's not cured yet, and if you've let this cure far past what the ready to cure time is, and it still feels sticky, that most likely means that you either didn't completely mix the silicone, or there's some kind of cure inhibitor in your mold, or something like that came in contact with it. That's rare, but can happen. So let's start breaking this open by taking off these clamps. Start with the top clamp, toss it off to the side clamp. Now we're going to work our way around the mold, and there's these little sprues here. You're going to want to just pull those out just like that as you find them. One more. If you are getting sprues like this, that's perfect. That means that you poured the mold properly and that you put enough pressure as you are pressing down to properly fill the mold. Now for this big one here on the back, right there, I'm going to cut that. So I'll take my razor, cut that there, and then keep working my way around the outside. Great, it looks like I got all the sprues. I'm going to come back with my razor, and I am going to cut around the perimeter. Doesn't take a lot of force. The razor cuts silicone pretty easily, so you should just have... Oh, I missed a sprue. There we go. You should just have to nick the silicone to get the cut started. Yes, this is a lot of waste, and you can use less if you'd like to, but again, the issue is if you end up having too little and there's not any spillover like this, you're going to end up with gaps in the mold and the mask will be unusable. So keep that in mind when you're deciding how much silicone to use. So I'm also going to clean up the exterior as I'm here. There we go. Now for this part, you're going to want to get a screwdriver like this. A large flat tip should be the best. There we go. And you're going to wedge that into these grooves around the perimeter of your mold. And these parts are what allow you to crack the mold open. So take a screwdriver. You want to start on these sides here, just under the handle, like that, and just kind of, with a twisting motion, crack that mold open. And then just start working your way around. The goal here is to crack the mold open. You're not trying to completely open it up, so don't worry about really getting in there and forcing it. Now, making sure that you had plenty of soap or mold release on this in that earlier step is really important to making sure that this is easy to separate. So now that I've got it down to about that far out, I should be good to press it out. So let's try that. So to press it out, there's these little handles here on the sides. Put your fingertips on those and put your thumb in the middle here and press down just like that. Now you've pressed it out. Go around the perimeter, pull out your dowel pins. Sometimes if you're using the 3D printed ones, they can get stuck. That's fine. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to clean up, but really not that big of a deal. All right, there we go, last one out. Now you can see here, there is a little bit of flashing around the perimeter here. Now, if you go the extra sanding step and sand down this edge, you can get to a point where there's no longer this flashing, but if you're only making a couple of these, this is fine, it comes off no issue, and you really shouldn't be worried about it. Start with your razor here on this big back sprue, and carefully cut that while being careful not to remove too much of the mask, just like that. And then again with your razor, cut along the edge, and then cut along your edge. If you don't have a razor, you can also do this with scissors once you've removed it, but I found that this is the easiest and cleanest way to do that. So now, done with the razor for now, set it off to the side, and now you're going to want to clean the rest of this up with your fingernail. Don't use the razor anymore past this, otherwise you risk nicking the mask, and then you can damage it and it will end up breaking later on. And that is not good. So all you're doing here is working your fingernail into that groove between the mask and the flashing, and using that to trim up the flashing. That looks like it's as clean as I'm going to get it. You can go back later with a razor or with scissors on the outside and cut it up, but don't do it while it's in the mold, otherwise you risk cutting the mask. So now we're going to clean up this insert press piece. So I'm going to use a slightly different razor. So I've nicked the end off this, and the goal of this is that when you put it between that piece and the silicone, you can cut it without cutting too much into the silicone. And that's pretty helpful. So what I'm going to do is take that razor, put it on this flat, and slowly slide it along. As you do this, you're going to be pressing up into that plastic piece. That way you cut into the mask as little as possible, while also making sure you get all the flashing. It's better to do this on a table so it's a little bit smoother and you get cleaner cuts. I'm doing it in the air, that way I can better demo for you guys and you can see a little bit better how I do it. But ideally you do it down like this, and that would give you kind of a nice flat clean surface. Actually, I'm going to do the rest of it this way. I need to go back and trim up these sprues. But then you should be able to peel it off just like that and get a nice square edge around the end there. So now to pull up the mask, you're going to go to the end here and work your finger underneath the back. You can see there how it's starting to come up just like that. Work it up just like that. Now be careful here. Don't pull yet. When you pull this mask out, you're going to want to pull it in this direction. Don't pull it up. Pull it this way. There's a little groove in here that puts the groove in the nose of the mask. If you try and pull up, you're going to end up ripping that out like the mask I showed earlier, so don't do that. So, once you've got it partially pulled out, you want to reach over here on one side, doesn't really matter which side you start on, just ahead of the button, and pull horizontally just like I showed you. You should feel it slightly give. Once you felt that, go and do the same thing on the other side, and just like that, it should slide out. If you put the right amount of soap in there, this should come out absolutely no issue. But if you haven't soaped it or put any kind of mold release on there, you'll end up tearing that. But as you saw, this one came out super, super easy, so you should be fine. So now, for the final portion, we're going to clean up this inside portion. So for that, I like to use this razor blade. But again, you can just tear this out with your fingers, and it doesn't really affect how well the mask works. It's more of how well it looks and how professional it looks. No need to press super hard here, just gently drag it. And that should be it. Just like that, pulls out no issue. So now, last part to get this piece out, you're going to take the mask and from the inside, pull it open like that. Do the same thing in the opposite direction. Now you should be good to pull it out. There you go. This little residue here, that's just some of the soap water that was worked out of the part. Not a problem, doesn't affect it. It's just soap water, so you're golden. I'll set that off to the side with the rest 5 parts. And that should give you a completed mask. There's a little bit of flashing and sprue left there. That's super easy to clean up with scissors or with a razor blade later. But besides that, your mask should be ready to go. Before you use this mask and before you give it to anyone else, you want to make sure that you properly clean the mask and get it ready to use. So let me clean this up a little bit and then I'll be back to show you that process. Alright, now in this step we're going to clean and sterilize the mask. For this, I use standard soapy water, same kind of solution we used in the earlier step for coating the molds. Soap is fantastic at killing viruses as well as killing most household contaminants. And I also have a bucket here of just plain water. We use this to rinse off the mask. This can also be done in a sink without any issues, so you should be fine either way. So I'll take this, put it in the soap water, make sure I'm really getting the soap into all those grooves. You want to get it in between the grooves here in the mouthpiece, like that, and also get it into the nose piece, just like that. Now, I like to let this soak for a little bit, that way I know that the soap has fully penetrated. So while I'm letting that soak, let me show you how I bake these masks. Now I have a toaster oven, just like the ones you can pick up at any store, that has been converted into a reflow oven, which is a little bit fancy, and I know most of you don't have something like this, but I'm using it because, you know, use the best equipment that you have available. And this basically just allows me to turn it on and set a very precise temperature, which for the mask isn't really important. You should be fine putting this in your just standard household oven without any issues. Let me find an outlet and plug this in. The mask has been sitting now for about an hour in the solution. Should have plenty of time to work the soap into everywhere that needs to be and have killed any kind of virus or bacteria that would have been on the mask. So now I'm going to take the mask, try and drip it off the best I can, rinse it off in the water. Again, this can be done in a sink. Try and rinse all the soap out. It's not super important, but make sure that it doesn't end up being slippery for later. All right, that looks good to me. So now I'm going to put this in the oven like that, and I'll start the drying process. We'll leave this in here. It's at 120 degrees Celsius, which is about 275 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're going to be doing it in your own home oven, there's a reference. All right, the mask has been in the oven for a little bit, for a few hours now, and it should be nice and cooled down. So we should be good. So when I pull these out, if I'm making them for hospitals or other organizations like that, I always like to try and remain clean with it. Don't touch the mask. Don't breathe on it. I'm wearing a mask and a face shield right now when I do this. And then it goes directly into a Ziploc bag like that. And then it doesn't leave this bag until it gets to the end user. All right, with this mask done, go on to the next video. If you're on the website, scroll down for instructions. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, I should have a link around here maybe, or down here somewhere, that will show you how to actually assemble a mask, all the parts that go into this, and how to put together in a way that's usable, safe, and is going to protect you the best. Cool. All right, I'll see you there.